Hi everyone, this is Scott. For maps, references, and images for each episode, as well as links to all my social media, please go to ancientworldpodcast.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/theancientworld. Thanks again for listening. Around 3500 BC, the people of Uruk and the surrounding region embarked on a cultural expansion. In the absence of written records, their exact motivations are unknown. Whether a hunger for resources, a missionary zeal to shine the light of civilization, or simple wanderlust, the Uruk expansion rolled across the northern plains and touched the surrounding mountains. And when it collapsed around 3100, the mountains quickly touched back. As I covered early on, the Kura-Araxes of the Armenian Plateau embarked on their own expansion, spreading across the northern region of Subartu, then driving southwest through the Levantine highlands and southeast onto the Persian Plateau. Per Roger Matthews and Hassan Fazeli Nashley, Kura-Araxes' goals were likely modest. More arable land, pasture for herded animals, and maybe good soil to grow vines in. If they happened across new sources of metal, so much the better. At the exact same time, another major cultural horizon emerged in the region of Susa. The city had been influenced by the Uruk expansion, with closely linked material remains, and the era's end saw the burning of Susa's Acropolis and the city's abandonment. In its wake, a new group of people entered the city and decided to set up shop. Their origins are a bit of a mystery. Per the authors, the newcomers had strong connections to regions to the east, Fars in particular, suggesting highland origins. They apparently brought a truckload of confidence, because, before you know it, they also decided to take their culture down a path of radical expansion. What are the culture's telltale signs? Well, the most visible sign was a brand new script, quite different from Sumerian cuneiform. Per M. Willis Monroe and colleagues, it had between 500 and 1600 distinct signs, a combination of ideograms and numbers, and was written from right to left and top to bottom. Inscribed clay tablets holding the script had a header section, a series of entries, and a final summary or tally. It appears to have been an administrative shorthand, and may not have had phonetic elements representing a spoken language, which is why it's often referred to as proto-writing. The script is known as Proto-Elamite, and the culture that developed and spread the script is called the Proto-Elamite Horizon. Per Matthews and Nashley, the newcomers quickly realized the benefits to be had from a tight administration of the region's rural production. Texts mainly deal with agricultural produce, livestock, human labor, and field accounts. Many texts address the issue of rations of grain to low-status workers, who were organized into work gangs with overseers and administrators. The large volumes of grain and large numbers of animals and workers recorded on tablets from Susa suggest the city played a key role in the administration of the economy. Interestingly, while rejecting the Sumerian cuneiform script, the Proto-Elamites adopted not only Sumerian accounting practices, but also the concept of the Uruk expansion, which inspired them to create their own pan-Iranian network of commercial outposts. Per the authors, artifacts of the Proto-Elamite horizon span an area of some 550,000 square kilometers of modern Iran, though they're thinly spread throughout. Remains are mainly concentrated in a handful of widely dispersed locations. a half-dozen outposts marking the early boundaries of an Elamite cultural area. In addition to serving as nodes of control, they also represented gateway communities for contact between the Proto-Elamites and the people of nearby regions. And at this point, I'm virtually going to beg you to refer to the map I've posted, since it'll really help with this next part. Okay, so Susa served its traditional role as gateway between Iran and Sumer. Per Matthews and Nashley, another outpost called Shar-e-Sokta, sited along the Helmand River, may have served as a gateway between far eastern Iran and the regions of Afghanistan and Baluchistan, the lands approaching the Persian Gulf and Indus Valley. Another outpost, Tepe-Hisar, just south of the Caspian Sea, may have served as a gateway between northeastern Iran and northern Central Asia. The site of Tepe-Yahya in the Jiroft region had material connection to parts of Iran, southeastern Turkey, Afghanistan, western Pakistan, and the Persian Gulf. Standardized aspects of many of these sites, architectural consistency, uniform mud bricks, building plans, etc., suggest some sort of centralized planning, possibly the same body that developed and spread the new Proto-Elamite script. From the early basic tablets found at Susa, the script can be used to track the horizon spread, first to central and northern Iran and later to the south and east. The Proto-Elamite horizon lasted for several centuries, administering a burgeoning rural economy, pioneering complex metallurgy, securing a wide array of coveted materials, and crafting high-quality objects. In the Zagros highlands of southwestern Iran, their dominant site was Anshan. Per the authors, Anshan was a literal mile-high city, set around 1,600 meters above sea level in a broad valley drained by the Kur River. It featured a large mounded upper town, an extensive lower town, and a massive mud brick city wall extending for 5 kilometers. The wall alone's been estimated to have required some 140,000 person-days of labor. Matthews and Nashley suggest that some Proto-Elamite sites, including Anshan and Tepe-Yahya, may have only been occupied seasonally, with traders, craftspeople, and community leaders arriving in spring and departing in autumn along with the herds and herders. Such a system would have ensured optimum use of lowland and highland resources by people and animals. And if significant elements of society were seasonally moving between major centers, it'd help explain the long-distance interactions and material culture similarities across large geographic spans that characterize the Proto-Elamite horizon. In the central Zagros region of Kermanshah, the dominant site was Tapa-Tialaneh. And please let me digress for a minute on Tapa-Tialaneh. In an article published as I was writing this, in January 2026, Guillermo Carvajal reports that excavations performed at the site by the University of Kurdistan in 2023 and 2024 uncovered more than 7,000 seal impressions, 200 figurines, dozens of clay tokens or counters, and 2 cylinder seals, all dating to the Proto-Elamite period. The finds actually represent the largest corpus of administrative artifacts from late prehistory ever found in the ancient world. They also identify Tapa-Tialaneh as a key center of trade and bureaucracy. That being the case, you'd assume they do a fairly brisk trade with their closest regional neighbor, their fellow expansionists of the Kura-Araxes culture, via their outpost at Godin Tepe in nearby Luristan. But my friends, I must inform you that is incorrect. As you may recall from way back, Kura-Araxes' culture showed little evidence of hierarchy. Per Matthews and Nashley, they had no palaces, temples, or administrative structures, writing, seals, or ceilings, or elaborate burials. Or, by the way, any evidence of warfare or conflict. Their cultural, religious, and economic lives were entirely centered on the home, in particular on the family hearth. And they were apparently not at all impressed with the budding hierarchical tendencies of several neighboring cultures. Yes, we are looking at you, the Proto-Elamite horizon. With the result that, despite living in close proximity, there's absolutely zero evidence of any kind of cross-cultural exchange. In fact, while they endured, the Kura-Araxes basically served as a barrier to regional trade. The authors also highlight that Kura-Araxes lands in the Transcaucasus have the earliest evidence for viticulture and viniculture. So, sitting hearthside with a glass of wine, grumbling about rising authoritarianism, just so utterly radically different from our lives today. For mysterious and likely disparate reasons, both cultures suffered severe declines around 2700 BC. Kura-Araxes territories in northwestern Iran experienced large-scale abandonment, with at least one site showing extensive destruction by fire. At the same time, per the authors, the centralizing authorities of the Proto-Elamite world lost their ability to exert control over their widely dispersed regional power bases. Given the timing, this may partly be due to early Sumerian kings launching frequent attacks on the Proto-Elamite home base of Susa. It may have also been expedited by locals, who were getting tired of heavy-handed bureaucratic interference in their daily lives. Either way, with the horizon's collapse, the Proto-Elamite script fell into disuse, with the consequence that writing entirely disappeared from Western Iran for centuries, right down to the Akkadian conquest. In central and eastern Iran, the absence of writing endured much, much longer. It's in the subsequent period, starting around 2600 BC, that new complex societies emerged in various parts of Iran and beyond. These are sometimes called secondary civilizations, as they were all inspired, in some sense, by Sumer. Per Philip L. Cole, these secondary states share common traits, including images of lion-headed eagles, bearded bulls, eared serpents, and scorpion men, the circulation of metal artifacts, jewelry, and stone vessels, and raising stepped or terraced monuments. They also tended to be smaller and less urbanized than Sumer. Per Bertil Leonet and Nadezhda A. Dubova, these states also lacked grandiose images of persons with political power. Many also lacked a written language. So, in Susiana, you have an Elamite kingdom in a broadly Sumerian style. In the interior highlands, you see resurgence at the former Proto-Elamite site of Anshan, which had eventually become the nexus of Elamite culture. Further southeast, you see the rise of Marhashi, or the Jiroft culture, closely associated with another new culture just across the sea at Magan. Even further east, but also connected by sea, you see the rise of the Indus Valley civilization. We've discussed all these cultures over the course of the series, mainly because they all interacted with our chatty friends in Akkad. This episode, I wanted to cover a few other cultures east of the Zagros that we haven't really touched on yet. First, let me set the stage. Per Matthews and Nashley, in contrast to Mesopotamia and Egypt, many complex polities that developed across Bronze Age Iran and Central Asia can be described as oasis riverine systems, and that they developed alongside major rivers that never reached the sea. Instead, they drained into inland swamps, marshes, and ultimately deserts. Per C.C. Lambert-Karlovsky, such rivers form alluvial fans as they empty into the desert, affording numerous opportunities for agriculture within the fingered network. They also allow for building an integrated grid of canals to further enhance productivity. The Halil River of the Marhashi homeland was one such oasis riverine system. Another such system was the Helmand River, some distance northeast of Marhashi. Per Matthews and Nashley, in the late 4th and 3rd millennia BC, a new civilization developed across the watershed of the Helmand River, spanning sites such as Mungdagak in the southern Hindu Kush and Shar-e-Sokta near the Lut Desert in eastern Iran. The sites exhibited similarity in their architecture, ceramics, stone artifacts, metallurgy, figures, and engraved items. Let's focus for the moment on Shar-e-Sokta. As I mentioned, in the Proto-Elamite period, the settlement likely served as a gateway between far eastern Iran and the regions of Afghanistan and Baluchistan. Per the authors, that phase ended with a major fire that consumed most of the site. The next phase began around 2600 with the building of a massive structure, composed of two distinct architectural complexes enclosed by a large wall system that covered a total area of 6,000 square meters. The structure had a remarkable resemblance in scale and plan to contemporary buildings at Kish and Eridu that are widely interpreted as palaces. There's also increased evidence for the use of elite materials, like chlorite, ivory, and carnelian beads. Archaeologists also recovered a wooden gaming board similar to the famous game of Ur, along with all its gaming pieces, as well as a headless torso sculpture with similarities to the equally famous IVC Priest King. Per Matthews and Nashley, Shar-e-Sokta was situated within a dense network of contemporary settlements, which it likely served as a central place for craft production and for burial of their dead. In fact, there's a growing consensus that most locally produced items were intended for grave deposition. The city hosted an immense necropolis of some 20 to 30,000 graves. Ceramic vessels recovered from graves are in a wide variety of styles, suggesting origins in Baluchistan, Marhashi, Central Asia, and northeastern Iran. This, along with a lack of consistency in grave orientation, suggests that Shar-e-Sokta was less a true city than an enlarged trading entrepot, a sort of prehistoric caravanserai, in which merchants and tradesmen from across the Indo-Iranian borderlands congregated to do business. Let's head up to northeastern Iran. This region includes the Alborz Mountains, just south of the Caspian, and the Kopet Dag Mountains, just southeast of the Caspian. And you might remember the Kopet Dag is where the later Parthian Empire got its start. Per the authors, the northeast is considered a frontier zone between the upland communities of the Persian Plateau and the oasis communities of Central Asia. The archaeological culture of this frontier region is known as Namazga, named for the local site of Namazga Depe. Per Cole, the locals practiced herding, mostly of cattle, along with small-scale irrigation agriculture, starting with a diversion of rain-fed streams flowing down from the Kopet Dag Mountains. During the Proto-Elamite period, known locally as Namazga III, the locals constructed larger canals, paralleling the terminal streams from the deltaic fans of the lower Tedjan River, another oasis riverine system. At the same time, a considerable distance off to the northeast, the Namazga settled the site of Sarazm in the Zarafshan River Valley. near the border of modern Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. The site was blessed with fertile soil, and the nearby mountains held plenty of copper, along with being a major source of turquoise. These resources sparked a bustling trade with several regional centers, including Mundigak south of the Hindu Kush, Shari Sokta on the Helmand, Baluchistan, and the Namazgha homeland of northeastern Iran. On the demise of the Proto-Elamite horizon around 2700 BC, settlements in the Namazgha homeland were largely abandoned. But Sarazm evidently kept right on trucking along. Its economy and population reached their peak around 2500 BC, during what's called the Namazgha IV period. And by that time, their Kopet Dag homeland was also showing signs of recovery. Per Matthews and Nashley, rich grave finds at the site of Park High, including lapis, silver, and other artifacts, reflect the rise of new trade and consumption centers, most notably at the Kopet Dag sites of Akdepe and Altendepe. Per Leonet and Dubova, by 2300 BC, Altendepe had grown to become a large urban setting, holding a monumental stepped cult center resembling a ziggurat. Similar buildings also emerged at nearby Tureng Tepe, as well as at Mundigak, south of the Hindu Kush. The former Proto-Elamite frontier city of Tepe Hisar also reclaimed its regional prominence, as reflected by wealthy burials and other exotic finds. So, interesting things were starting to happen, but it's in the subsequent Namazgha V period that things really started to take off.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Your planet is now marked for death.
Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four: First Steps is now streaming on Disney+.
We will protect you.
As a family.
Light him up, Johnny!
Marvel's first family is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
That is fantastic.
And critics say it's one of the best superhero movies of all time.
Oh!
Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four: First Steps, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
What time is it, Ben? It's clobber time!
Around 2300 BC, some farmer-herders from the Kopet Dag migrated just a smidge off to the northeast to settle the deltaic fan of the lower Murghab River. Yes, another oasis riverine system. Though the Namazgha had settled the area before, they'd apparently been away for some time, during which they'd continued to hone their advanced water management techniques. Upon their return, the Murghab region quickly became, and long remained, one of the most productive regions of Central Asia. The site they colonized, Kaleli, was located in the northernmost Murghab oasis. Per Leonet and Dubova, the domestic architecture, including homes and craft complexes, shows a strong connection to the so-called noble quarter at the Kopet Dag site of Altendepe. But Kaleli also featured a new type of building unknown in the Kopet Dag, a thick-walled rectangular fortress with narrow gates and high corner towers, and additional towers spaced along the walls. The closest analog was at Mundigak, south of the Hindu Kush. From its inception around 2300 BC, this type of fort, the so-called Kala, would continue to dominate southern Central Asia for the next 4,200 years. The Kaleli fortress was only a start. At the site selected for their primary settlement, Goner Depe, or just Goner, the colonists built a scaled-up and far more elaborate version. Per the authors, the large rectangular fortress at Goner enclosed a separate fortified inner palace. 3 entrances in the fortress walls were flanked by towers on each side, while the inner palace had a double wall with towers and arrow slits. Structures outside the fortress walls included a major temple, a large necropolis, 2 man-made reservoirs with cultic structures, communal dining complexes, and buildings for living and craft production. The entire settlement was surrounded by a long, oval-shaped perimeter wall. Its unusual features and unmatched scale led many to believe that Goner was a new royal capital. But capital of what exactly? Well, the Murgab River was later known as the Margus, which gave its name to the territory of Margiana. Over time, the Kopetdag colonists also spread to the lower Oxus River, the heart of ancient Bactria. So the new polity's been somewhat clinically named the Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, or BMAC. It's sometimes also called the Greater Khorasan Civilization, which also has its merits. Its other title, though less precise, is probably the most evocative, so I'll mostly be calling it the Oxus Civilization. What's so special about the Oxus Civilization? Please find a comfortable chair. First, the BMAC is a fairly recent discovery, only unearthed in the 1970s. Its principal excavators been Victor Sariondy, then of Moscow's Institute of Archaeology, Soviet Academy of Sciences. Since the BMAC used no written language, most of what we know comes from archaeology. Unfortunately, the region's been subject to extensive looting in both antiquity and in the modern era. Regardless of these limitations, the civilization's origins are fairly clear. Per Leonetin Dubova, much of BMAC culture, including figurines, pottery decoration, and seal motifs, came from the Namazga culture of the Kopetdag foothills, which itself had been influenced by the Proto-Elamite horizon. But, as I mentioned, the culture apparently derived its monumental architecture from the southern Hindu Kush, which highlights the fact that, from its earliest foundations, the Oxus civilization drew from a variety of sources. Along with the sites of Kaleli and Goner, kalas were built in other oases, including Aji Kui and Togalok in the Murgab, and Dashli, Sapali Tepe, and Zarkutan near the Upper Oxus. Per Lambert Karlovsky, the fortifications are more impressive than any found within the contemporary Bronze Age Near East, and were designed to protect water sources and provide a defensive retreat for the community in times of attack. Kalas tended to vary in size, and early sites had rectangular towers while later examples had round ones. Per Leonetin Dubova, each kala had numerous satellite settlements, and their linear pattern suggests their placement along major canals of the deltaic fan and along extended irrigation canals within the oases. Trade appears to have been the main driver of Oxus wealth. From the get-go, the civilization was plugged into a huge regional commercial network, connecting Elam, Marhashi, the Zarevshan region, the Helmand region, Baluchistan, and the Indus Valley. And what did the BMAC have to trade? Well, the plains of Margiana had few mineral resources, but the surrounding mountains, including the Alborz, Zarevshan, and Hindu Kush, were extremely rich in metal and semi-precious stones. The main commodities used for trade were lapis lazuli and copper, but they also had access to gold, silver, turquoise, alabaster, and chlorite. In addition to trading them back and forth, the BMAC also used these materials to make their own finely crafted objects. Per the authors, the output came in a variety of forms, including seals, vessels, statues, weapons, musical instruments, and jewelry. While continuing to produce traditional Namazga-type terracotta figurines, they also created some striking new types. Among the most remarkable and ubiquitous were composite statues of women, made using lightstone alabaster and darkstone chlorite. Per Massimo Vidal, these statues, known as Bactrian princesses or Oxus ladies, may represent a goddess of fertility, vegetation, water, and possibly the mountains, similar to her Elamite counterparts. Physically, the statues appear to derive from depictions of Elamite queens, though their garments appear to be made of Sumerian fleece. There was also an apparent distinction in use. In Elam, royal female statues were typically found in temples, while Oxus ladies were mostly recovered from tombs. Oxus ladies also appear in other BMAC imagery, often interacting with animals or fantasy hybrid creatures like dragon snakes or lion unicorns. Per Leonette and Dubova, her frequent portrayal as a mistress of animals evokes striking parallels to the later Mediterranean Potnia Theron. Other stylistic traits and subject matter, including scenes of bull leaping, also bear similarities to later Minoan and Mycenaean Greek art, though in reality they're likely derived from earlier Baluchistan, IVC, and Marhashi archetypes. Despite her prominence, the Oxus lady is just one of many female figures who dominate BMAC imagery. Another regional goddess is shown with wings and horns, while another, an agricultural goddess, has wheat ears sprouting from her shoulders. In another image, a goddess with twin eagle heads is flanked by snakes that appear to be defending her against swooping eagles. I mean, there's really just a lot going on here. Another prominent recurring statue, also made of alternating light and dark stone, is what's called the balafre, or scarface. The figure is typically shown with a facial scar, a missing eye, skin covered with scales, a diadem, and a small globular pot, tipped on its side to pour out its contents. His general demeanor tends to evoke a grim, determined, human-like hero, either being consumed by a snake or possibly wearing its skin. The missing eye, lost in battle or surrendered in penalty or sacrifice, evokes the much later Norse god Odin. Whatever story it's meant to relate must have had deeply local origins. There's nothing even remotely similar in other Southwest Eurasian cultures. Per Vidal, another recurring mythological or divine being is a muscular winged male with two raptor heads, with limbs terminating in powerful claws. His most celebrated appearance is on a famous silver and gold ceremonial axe, currently on display at the Met Museum in New York, where he touches both a winged dragon and a wild boar at the same time. I remember first seeing the piece in 2011, and it remains one of the coolest objects I've ever encountered. Per Leonette and Dubova, other male figures in Oxus imagery appear to have been borrowed from the Sumerian Gilgamesh epic, with a human-like hero interacting with some kind of monstrous creature. Like with Mesopotamia, one widespread medium for cultural expression was the use of seals and sealings. From the 4th millennium BC onward, Mesopotamian-type cylinder seals were highly popular, especially in the contact regions of Elam, Marhashi, and the IVC. Per the authors, at the same time, a new type of metallic compartmented seal was being used in the Helmand region. One such seal, recovered from Shar-e-Sokta, shows the earliest known image of the winged horned female deity who later found her way into Oxus culture. During the Third Millennium BC, the use of these distinctive metallic compartmented seals spread across the Persian plateau. Their use finally peaked with the Oxus Civilization, where they constitute the main types of seals for several centuries. More than 2,000 Oxus seals and sealings have been recovered from the BMAC region. Grave finds at Goner highlight the fact that women were responsible for most of the administrative sealing. This was also the case at Shar-e Sokta, as well as at the Kopet Dag site of Altan Depe, with seals most commonly found in female graves. Most seals show either a single motif, a geometric pattern, human, god, hero, animal, mixed creature, plant, or landscape, or a single scene, like humans hunting, interacting with gods, or fighting animals, or animals fighting each other. Per Leonette de Bova, there are very strong links between Oxus and Marhashi imagery. Similarities include human-animal hybrids acting as masters of animals, a pantheon dominated by female deities with attributes of plants and animals, and figures depicted with front-facing upper bodies, but with heads and lower bodies in profile. The authors assert that nearly all BMAC goddesses have clear antecedents in Marhashi art, and the main inspiration for BMAC imagery appears to be older Marhashi mythological motifs. Other aspects of Oxus culture can be inferred from imagery and grave finds. To start with, Oxus elites were incredibly wealthy. Per Lambert Karlovsky, one Goner tomb contained 24 vessels of gold, silver, and bronze, with one depicting a procession of 2 Bactrian camels in relief and an incised Bactrian camel at the base. Another tomb held a remarkable mosaic frieze of opposing lions. Per Vidal, 12 elite graves at Goner contained 4-wheel wagons, like those in the richest graves of Ur and Kish, along with luxury goods made of precious metals, ivory, alabaster, and chlorite. Per Leonette de Bova, one wagon was accompanied by the skeleton of a horse, while other grave sites held horse imagery or horse parts. Early evidence of a budding trade that we'll cover more next season. Per Vidal, in their leisure time, elites attended public ceremonies featuring bull leaping and other sports. They also apparently enjoyed drinking while listening to music. I know, total weirdos, right? Oxus women possessed high status compared to their regional counterparts. Both men and women used colored cosmetics that were stored in decorative containers. Ceremonial trumpets of bronze, silver, and gold may have been used for hunting, military parades, or for imitating the calls of stags or other wild animals. Elites used hunting dogs to chase down ibex, gazelle, and other horned creatures. Oxus warriors used a composite bent bow adopted from the steppe, carried arrows and a quiver behind their back, and bore daggers, axes, and maces. It's still a somewhat open question how the region was governed. Per Lambert Karlovsky, the spacing of major settlements with kalas suggests defined areas of control, possibly under tribes or extended families. The fact the settlements were heavily fortified suggests some degree of conflict. Still, substantial coordination was needed to manage critical resources, primarily water and productive land. This included organizing labor for the construction of irrigation works and to maintain central canals, their dams, and locks, collecting taxes, and organizing, maintaining, provisioning, and controlling dependent personnel involved in agricultural production. The central authority would have also had judicial responsibilities as well as a monopoly over long-distance trade. While a regional council may have sufficed, it's possible these decisions fell to a single ruler. If so, one likely based at Goner. On the other hand, the Oxus civilization lacks the kind of self-aggrandizing art that such a paramount ruler might create. Apart from trade, we know little of Oxus' international relations. The only nearby culture with written records, the Elamites, have zero mention of any diplomatic marriages, military conflicts, or royal gift exchanges with any unnamed Easterners. In contemporary Mesopotamian texts, the Oxus civilization may be the polity known as Tukrish. But again, they only record the exotic goods they could access. We know that an Oxus outpost was built at Shaddad, close to the Marhashi capital of Konar Sandal, as well as to establish north-south copper trading routes. And we also know that at some point, for some reason, the two cultures apparently came to blows. Per Vidal, a scene on a contemporary pedestaled goblet depicts a wounded and handcuffed Marhashi prisoner being escorted by a band of Oxus warriors. The Marhashi is identified by his pointed beard, thick vertical braid, and cross-hatched V-shaped kilt, while the Oxus contingent may include a high priest and ritual executioner. Other figures appear to be soldiers, carrying either captured booty or food and wine for a ritual banquet. Per the author, the goblet likely belonged to an Oxus ruler who defeated, captured, and killed his Marhashi opponent. It's a fascinating object. I'll get into all the nitty-gritty details in one of my Patreon episodes. As I mentioned last episode, there are no Mesopotamian texts mentioning Marhashi for over a century, between their failed attack on Shar-Kali-Shari and the marriage of Shulgi's daughter to a Marhashi king. So we don't know what challenges the Marhashi faced during the first century of the aridification event. We know that at some point they relocated their capital to an alternate site a few miles north on the opposite bank of the river. Their conflict with the Oxus civilization may have taken place sometime during this same lost century. As we've seen, societies responded to the aridification event in a number of different ways. In Egypt and southern Mesopotamia, lower crop yields broke centralized control, and people often turned to local leaders. In northern Mesopotamia and much of Syria, rendered virtually unlivable, people were often forced to migrate into already densely populated lands. In northeastern Iran, we see something new. We have a culture based in the Kopet Dag who, around 50 years before the event, had already started to resettle the sparsely populated Murghab oases. Per Vidal, when the event kicked in around 2200, it led to decreased rainfall and shifting river courses in the Kopet Dag foothills, which prompted the depopulation of local sites and increased settlement in the Murghab. So, in this case, the event acted as a cultural accelerant for the development of the Oxus civilization. Per Matthews and Nashley, after the BMAC became established, say by 2150 BC or so, there's evidence of a movement of BMAC peoples and materials in a westward direction to sites in northeastern Iran. The two most likely vectors are either A. Kopet Dag refugees closely tied to the BMAC who chose to migrate west instead of east, or B. planned colonization by the BMAC to gain more direct access to the resources of the Persian plateau. And, like the earlier settlement at Sarazm, gave birth to an eastern or Zarafshan variant of the BMAC, some scholars believe this western expansion gave rise to the kingdom of Shamashki. We discussed Shamashki a bit last episode. By the time it first appears in texts, On an inscribed statue of Kutik and Shushinak, the kingdom controlled a swath of territory north of Elamite Anshan. After Ur-Nama's defeat of Kutik and Shushinak, Shamashkid swept in and taken Anshan, and much of the Elamite Zagros. Their Oxus ties are hard to quantify. Vidal reports that decorative axes and hammers crafted in the BMAC were awarded by the Shamashki to honored dignitaries. But in the maximum interpretation, by the reign of King Shulgi, the BMAC may have been the dominant culture from the Zagros Mountains to the Hindu Kush to the frontiers of the Indus Valley, with the notable exception of Marhashi, which, as we mentioned, had close ties with the Third Dynasty of Ur. We'll be exploring all the ramifications of this more next episode. I want to touch on two more frontiers. The first is the northeastern frontier of the BMAC at Sarazm on the Zarafshan River. Per Leonet and Dubova, the 21st century BC saw an increase in both the supply of and demand for tin. Due to its scarcity and its critical role in making tin bronze, tin remained the world's most valuable metal, around 10 times more valuable than silver. And while the Luristan region of the Zagros Mountains holds some tin, the only ancient sites with significant deposits were the mountains of the Zarafshan River Valley near Sarazm. Per David W. Anthony, full-scale tin mining wouldn't kick off until the Second Millennium BC. Instead, locals mainly relied on placer minerals recovered from the Zarafshan River. As odd as it sounds, this trickle of metal, transshipped via the IVC and the Persian Gulf kingdoms, may have represented all the known tin in the ancient world. Now, with supply and demand increasing, the Oxus Civilization held an effective monopoly. Which brings us to the second frontier. Per Leonet and Dubova, the 21st century BC also saw increasing interaction between the Oxus and Indus Valley civilizations. Per Vidal, seals and sealing suggest two-way movement of officials in charge of trade or on diplomatic missions between the BMAC and the IVC. Good relations were also reflected in the establishment of an IVC outpost at Shortugai, north of the Hindu Kush and fairly close to the Oxus settlement at Sarazm. The outpost was likely intended to oversee IVC interests in local tin and lapis lazuli. But even as bilateral relations were deepening, the Indus Valley was facing a major crisis. Per Elena Glash and colleagues, the Indus River is heavily dependent on rainfall from both the Indian summer monsoon and Indian winter monsoon. The period between 2500 and 2300 BC had featured stronger than normal winter monsoons, which facilitated the rise of the IVC megacities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. A century into the aridification event, both monsoons had weakened considerably, resulting in decreased flooding and lower agricultural production. Though less stark and sudden than in northern Mesopotamia, the results were broadly similar. The abandonment of cities and depopulation of affected regions, in this case the western Indus, along with a corresponding increase in the number of small rural settlements in parts of the eastern Indus. Per Liviu Gyoson, some locals migrated toward the Ganges basin, where the rains continued to be more dependable, but were also insufficient to sustain large cities. The process began around 2100 and was virtually complete by 1900. And at some point in between these dates, the IVC lost its ability to engage in regional affairs. Tools of commerce, like seals and weights, disappear from IVC sites. Most notably, the ancient trade through the Persian Gulf, from Maluha to Magan and Dilmun to Sumer, slowly ground to a halt. This increased the role of overland trade across the Iranian plateau, routes largely controlled by Shamashki. During the same rough time frame, 2100 to 1900, many ancient centers east of the Zagros were also struggling to survive. Per Matthews and Nashley, the environments of eastern Iran in particular are extremely harsh, and even small changes in precipitation, dust deposition, or temperature could have devastating consequences. In the end, the fragile agricultural basis of many societies in the region was fatally affected by the lack of rainfall. The previously flourishing polities of southeastern Iran all significantly declined, as attested in the abandonment of long-lasting major settlements and craft production centers, including Tepe Yahya, Shaddad, and Shari Sokta. In fact, after around 2000 BC, significant human settlement of the region ceased for the next 1,200 years, with the earliest Iron Age occupation at Tepe Yahya not commencing until 800 BC. The Marhashi capital of Konar Sandal was definitely not immune, but absent from the list, as far as we can tell, were the BMAC and Shamashki. Next episode, it's back to Sumer in the ongoing reign of King Shulgi, as the Amorites take on a larger role both inside and outside the Ur-3 Empire. We'll meet Shu Sin, who really wants to be Naram Sin, as he pushes the empire out to its farthest extent. And we'll all find out exactly what happens when you poke the Shamashki bear one too many times. Would you like to listen to ad-free episodes of The Ancient World and a bunch of other great history podcasts? Then go to The Ancient World podcast on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to Airwave History Plus. You'll get a free 7-day trial to listen to ad-free episodes, bonus content, and more from the largest collection of history podcasts anywhere. So subscribe to Airwave History Plus on Apple Podcasts today.